All right, thanks a lot, Jen. And thank you all for coming. I'm surprised that there's anyone here around midterm. So, and I went to one event earlier, Josiah's event. I'm not sure if many of you went there. We worked together last summer. And I've been really impressed by the work Brian and the rest of the team here does to get you all to come out. It's really impressive. So yeah, thanks for taking the time. So I'll be talking about interning in the financial markets. You can see UBC Trading Group, of course, and then this is my fake company. So it doesn't act, the security laws in Canada make it very difficult to set up a real company. I write for some websites, and so it's just kind of like I guess to make me look a little more important than I actually am. So the agenda today, I'll go talk a little bit about myself, and then perhaps you can draw some parallels and as to my sort of profile and maybe what aspects of it might have helped me get into trading. I'll talk about my life on the trading floor this past summer in Hong Kong at Morgan Stanley. That was on the fixed income sales and trading, and then within that I was on what's called the non-deliverable forwards desk. So you'd be trading currencies with capital controls on it, and then for the second half of my internship I was on the G10 sales desk. So I've worked on both the trading side of the trading floor and also the sales side. So I can offer perspective on both aspects of the business. I'll then be going over the physical interview preparation and most importantly the mental interview preparation, which is by far the most important aspect. I've seen a lot of really bright people in interviews from top schools, especially when we were interviewing in Hong Kong. There's a lot of people from like Harvard, Georgetown, and they would really defeat themselves in the whole interview process just because it can be fairly intense, and so you really want to prepare yourself for that. I'll then share my experiences, and then I'll move on to the conclusion. So, with that in mind, do the intro. My name is Sean Bellamy McNulty, fourth year BCom student. I'm a major in finance, minor in economics. My GPA, that's without my exchange, so my exchange drops that GPA down quite substantially. But just to give you an idea, I'm not like a 90% plus student or out of this world GPA. I suspect probably anything above a 75% is good. You just want to be in that sort of range. Once you're in that range, it doesn't really come up too much. I actually brought a bunch of business cards along with me. These are my Sauder cards. I got to get rid of them before the end of this semester. So if you want one, you can just take one and pass it around. You don't feel obliged to take one. If you don't want it, you can just pass it on, but I'm happy to answer any questions after this, or if I will be starting work on Bay Street August 6th, so if you find yourself in Toronto or want to learn more about working in Toronto, you can feel free to drop me an email. So that's my academic profile. Outside of university, and this is I think probably the key, and what really helped me through the interview process was the fact that I manage a real Forex fund on the side with just my own capital, and then as well I manage a small equity portfolio of other people's money. And then I write for the financial website seekingalpha.com, and I publish a newsletter weekly, the weekly McNulty Capital Management newsletter, which you can sign up for free, so highly recommend you do that. It's a fantastic piece of literature. Let's see, and so Forex. So I got quite lucky, and this works out quite well, because even if you have a losing story, it's still good to talk about. My story is a lot more fun to tell, right? So I caught a few big wins, but I still had quite a losing streak going at first, and then it's been quite a bit. Things have been good, and actually, what's kind of interesting about this is that my internship in Morgan Stanley started about here. So evidently, I did learn something working on the trading floor. So that also helped on interviews this time going around when they ask, about why you think that change happened, and you can talk about different experiences and just dealing with losing money, because you are going to lose money no matter what. And that's not even my worst loss. The year before, which doesn't come up in this, I had 1 month where I think I lost about $18,000, right? So it was basically all my money, and then I'm able to now rebuild it back up, and I'm ahead again. But you're going to have that blow up once. I think it's better to do it with your own money, and it does make a good story. So when I was interviewing for this summer's position, I was actually in a negative position with my Forex fund, and it still made for something to talk about. Seeking Alpha is a website. How many of you are familiar with Seeking Alpha? Just show of hands. So it's a fair amount of them. Okay. The great thing about this site is if you want to write for it, you can. You have to submit 3 articles. If they're up to their standard, they will authorize you as an author, and they actually pay you. So I get between $20 and on the really well-read articles, $300 per article. And so you can do this yourself. The stuff we write about at Sauder it's of a quality that will get published. So it might be something you might want to think about. It's very difficult to write at first, especially if you put your opinions out there. It obviously hurts if you're wrong, and some people can be, the internet can be quite cruel. So you will deal with, I think it can be tough at first, but once you get into that habit, it's a great habit to form, and also involves a lot of what you do actually working on the trading floor. Everyone on the trading floor does basically a morning mail out to all their clients, and so it's very similar to something you'd write for Seeking Alpha, where you talk about what's happening in the market and what your view is. And then of course there's my rankings as an author. So as you move up the rankings, if you get in the top 5, you actually end up as an opinion leader. So I'm hoping to get there eventually before I start work. So with that, I'll move on to life on the trading floor. So this takes me through my basic day. You arrive at 6 a.m. What I did on the trading side is you run a lot of models. So is anyone here familiar with VBA? Programming a little bit? Okay, it's an Excel language. It's something you should, if you have a chance, I'd start studying it now. There's online courses you can get, things like that. What I did before I started my internship is I talked to Professor Heinkel when I got the position, because I know he was a fixed income professor here, and he put me in touch with some people, and that's what they told me to do. So I did this whole online VBA course, and it helped out a lot because right off the bat, I was able to run some of these models on the trading floor, and as well as make adjustments to them and improve upon them. And so it allowed me to contribute right away. So it's a huge part of the trading side of the business, not the sales side, but definitely the trading side. I'd then read the paper. You want to keep up on everything that's happening. Then we'd have the morning meeting. Now the morning meeting was awesome because it was in this boardroom where you overlook the Hong Kong harbor. And it was absolutely beautiful. So that was one of the highlights. And then you just sit on the edge and take notes, but it was an interesting experience. I then do the breakfast run for my desk, and that was probably the worst part of my day because I'm sure you guys have heard those stories about if you get the order wrong, people you get yelled at and all these sorts of things. I'm sure you guys have all read Liar's Poker, I presume, or most of you have. All that's absolutely true. And so they give you these huge orders. Well, it depends what desk you're on. See, this is where me and Josiah differed. Josiah got a very friendly desk, and so he went up and had to get a few lattes, right? And then I went up, I had to get this huge cart, and I was getting toast with peanut butter, with butter on the side on some of them. Some people wanted butter on their thing. And to write it all down would seem as almost a bit of a weakness, and so you do get kind of put through that sort of stress test, and it's not something to really think about as you're just trying to get into the business, but if you can come up with some sort of system to master, maybe work as a waiter for a few weeks or something and then just get that down, that will help out a lot because I wasn't very good at that, and it made my first week or two a bit of not as much fun as it could have been. And then you can kind of read the rest of that there. I won't, but you can see it's a lot of building and updating Excel financial models. So do you guys have any questions about that in terms of the average day on a trading floor? Good? Okay, cool. Let me know if you do. Feel free to interrupt. I'd be happy to answer some. So then the questions to ask yourself after kind of seeing that schedule is, are you interested in macroeconomics? Are you interested in trying to make money off macroeconomics? Are you skilled in Excel? You really want to ask yourself, is that the type of day you want to do? Because to a lot of people, that doesn't look like a lot of fun, right? And understandably so. If you don't like sitting looking at a computer screen, punching in Excel formulas, and just asking big questions about where's oil prices going, what are the factors that affect oil prices, how do the oil sands and the kind of the shale gas movement affect oil prices? These are all projects I had to work on, and so I spent hours and hours and hours building things like that. And so if you're not inherently interested in macroeconomics and kind of in looking and investigating those sorts of issues, then it might not be the role for you, right? Or you might want to look at something more on the sales side rather than the trading side. And then of course, the dealing with pressure is is important. Basically, everyone on the trading floor is fairly risk-seeking, right? Which makes it a very fun place to work. So everyone there, everyone there is essentially, I don't want to use the word casino, but everyone there is very comfortable with placing bets, and I suppose it's almost like a kind of one. I like to think of it as the intellectual Olympics, is what I call it. And so you kind of have all these really smart people. I mean, everyone here is really smart. All the people you'll be competing with are very smart, and you have this kind of objective judge the market, and then it's who can make money off other people. And a lot of this stuff is zero sum, right? So the desks I was on, the non-deliverable forward desk, and then the G10 sales desk, if we were making money, somebody was losing money somewhere in the market, right? And so that's always something to remember, is that where in equities, everyone can make money, the economy can grow, everyone can make money. In currencies, that's not how it works, right? And so it makes it that much tougher to make money. So anyway, the key is, and I think this is key in life in general, is you really want to enjoy your life if you want to enjoy your work, right? I'm sure you guys all know Drake, YOLO, right? That's very, very important. This was my old desk. So this is my desk on the trading floor. And so these are all my currencies that these are the NDF currencies I was dealing with. I was actually the only one who did this iPad setup, and then more people started to do it. And then you have your news tickers. These are all bond and equity prices. And at the very top was Morgan Stanley's price, because you always want to know the share price of the company. Has any of you taken or gone to see Bruce Hilliard, I think it is, with Com 374? I know we've seen him, but has anyone else seen him? No? Okay, you'll eventually, if you're doing a finance major, you'll eventually hear from him, and he'll tell you to always know the company's stock price, right? And it's true, and the reason why it's true is that everyone you're working with on the trading floor has stock options, right? So my boss, I knew his stock options on Morgan Stanley started at about $30 a share, and Morgan Stanley was at about $14 a share, right? And so if Morgan Stanley went down to $12, I know he just lost a lot of money, right? So you just want to keep that in mind in terms of what his mindset's going to be, right? And a lot of times I'll make up a substantial portion of his income, so something to remember. So the physical interview preparation. I brought a prop for this, but actually I'll go through this first because these are some of my favorite quotes. Vince Lombardi, the will to win is not nearly so important as the will to prepare to win. The Confucius, for those from Asia, success depends upon previous preparation, and without such preparation, there's sure to be failure. By failing to prepare, you prepare to fail, Ben Franklin. Abraham Lincoln in his wood chopping aphorism. And then you have Robert Schuller, who's, I don't know much about who he is, but I thought this was a great quote, so I put it on there as well. And the key is that you can see there's a lot of great minds, they've all come to the same conclusion, right? Is that you have to put in the time before to give yourself the highest probability of success. So I have this interview binder, and I'm going to pass it around again so you can kind of take a look. I bring it to every single interview. So it has my resume, it has a cover letter, it has 2 pens, it has my business cards. So anytime I walk into an interview, I know I have everything I need, right? It's got all my cover letters, my Forex trading fund, my transcripts, everything, right? So you guys can, I'll pop it around. You can just take a look through and kind of see what I bring into me. But it's a really fantastic tool. And a lot of interviews you'll go to, they'll say, don't worry about bringing anything, bring something. Okay, and the reason why is the next slide, this is just details on the interview binder. But the law of reciprocity, reciprocity, I think I'm saying that right. So is that right, reciprocity? Is it? Okay. Because I hope so. Anyway, so this is a well-documented fact. It makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. We are all captive to this reptilian brain of ours, right? And so it's important to kind of use that to your advantage. So when you do something for someone, when you give someone something, there's an instinctual reaction from them that they want to give you something, right? And so I always try to, when I enter an interview, I never try to leave empty-handed, whether it's a business card, whether I'm giving them copies of my letters of reference, which I always have a few copies in behind that I can give them. I've actually left my first internship with Global Securities, and they went through the binder, and they're kind of looking at it and asking, so if we could have a copy of this, could we have a copy of this? And they left with like a stack of paper like this high, right? But I really think it helps quite a bit. Every interview I've ever done, sometimes you don't want to make it awkward and force something upon them, but I find that you kind of leave with a sense of goodwill because you've given them something, they've accepted it, you kind of had this gift-giving ceremony. So I highly recommend you do that. Yeah, and then this, if you really want to see the research behind that, this is a paper from 2000 that just talks about the economic consequences of the sort of gift-giving instinct. Dress code. Anyone know Indochino here? No, you do? Does anyone have a suit from Indochino? No? Nobody? They're great price anyway. The reason why I say that, it's actually a guy I know started the company. And so he's a good guy. And the suits start about $300-400, right? Custom tailored, it's important to do that. If you have, I got some suits tailored in Hong Kong, and then I also got some from Indochino, and they're actually quite good quality. I really like the Indochino suits. So GQ is awesome. I don't know if you guys read GQ, but it's still, it just kind of keeps you up to date on what's happening in different styles. Obviously, the two-tone shirts. I've seen this, in fact, did anyone here attend NIBC? Okay, yeah. Now, do you remember the championship team? There's that guy with like the black collar and then the gray shirt or something like that? And they didn't win, right? I tell you, that's part of the reason, right? You're like, I don't know who wears that, but like a black collar and on a dress shirt, like it's just, I mean, if you get up to a certain level, sure, there's not anyone who's going to say anything to you, but it's something that I always, you may have a similar instinct. My instinct's always to dress a little more flashier, and I found that's hurt me in the past. If there's something I would do differently, it would be dressed down a little bit more. Because your first few days on the trading floor, you look like you're coming off maybe a little arrogant. So yeah, keep it just white shirts, blue shirts, maybe a pink shirt, no green or anything like that, and then just really, I guess nothing that's going to offend anyone. So any questions about the physical interview preparation? Excellent. You can see that's working its way around. So that'll probably take a lot longer than the cards. So, but I'll leave it out there as we go through. So mentality is everything. By far the most important factor. I remember I guess it was the Morgan Stanley interview, the first round. There was this guy from Georgetown there, and really bright guy. And you could just see it as soon as we were confronted with this kind of qualitative and quantitative tests, and he was sitting to the right of me, and he just fell apart, right? He sat there with like his hands in his head, and you could see he was just devastated. He just let the pressure get to him, right? Another example, I won't mention any names, but I've seen a lot of Sauder students, right? And you'll talk to them face to face, and they're really personable people. They get on with everyone very well. But then as soon as they get around like an MD at like an NIBC or something like that, they turn into these huge ass kissers, right? Like they turn into like this whole different person, right? And you're not doing yourself any favors with that. And I think it comes from psyching yourself out, right? So I think it's really, really important to not do that. To remember that even if it's an MD or even the CEO of the bank, it's just another person. They put their pants on one leg at a time. And so there's no reason to get too impressed with them or to change who you are. You just talk to them like a regular person. I found that people who approach it that way do much better. And so you have this probability curve of life, as I like to call it, right? And so I talk a little bit more about it on the other side, but this is how I deal with it. And so you may find this helpful. You might not. Did anyone read Steve Jobs' biography? You did? Okay. Did anyone else? You did as well? Okay. Do you remember him talking about what the most useful mental tool he ever had throughout his whole life? It was, he would always remind himself that he was going to die one day, right? Yeah. And so I find that to be also a very helpful mental tool. So I find if you remember that, if you recall that, you have this short kind of life on Earth, where ideally you're pursuing happiness, try to have as good a time as you can, and then you're gone, right? I find that all the little problems, or most of the problems, can kind of melt away, and you can really focus on what's important. So these sort of interviews, they may seem really important, but really it's just part of this journey that you're on that is life, and it's not really something to get too worked up about. In fact, I'd say it's more important to really appreciate the situations you come in. So one technique I use is, like, wherever I go, usually you're interviewing in really nice financial towers. I mean, just take a look at the view. It's absolutely gorgeous, right? You're looking over these beautiful skyscrapers. It's fantastic. And so in between interviews, rather than sitting there trying to think about or re-examining what your last interview was and game planning for your next one, just look out the window and appreciate the view and appreciate the fact that you've made it this far. That was the view. So, I mean, it was just awesome, right? So I had the 4 30-minute interviews, and between each one, I just came to the window and I looked out and I was just thinking, man, that is absolutely gorgeous, right? And I've done an HDR effect to that. I don't know if you guys have those out. Like, it's a really awesome Camera Plus, I think it's called, for your iPhone, if you're wondering. But yeah, so between each 30-minute interview, I'd just go look out the window, I'd see that, and it was a very soothing experience. And so then when I went back into the interview room, I was totally calm and relaxed, and I could just talk to the person without sitting there trying to hit them with some sort of tailored message or come off as nervous. So yeah, there's this other book. Has anyone ever read Sam Harris before? No? He's one of my favorite authors. He's a great writer. He's more of a philosopher. So he's a neuroscientist and he has a philosophy undergrad, and he's a neuroscientist major, or he's a neuroscientist professionally, and he writes these different books. But essentially, he talks about in free will is it's a bit of an illusion. I mean, we're not in the philosophy course right now, but it's something to keep in mind. Is that you don't choose who your parents are. You don't choose where you're born, and so it's very difficult to feel too self-important about what you accomplish in life. A lot of it is random chance. Same with interviews, right? A lot of interviews, you getting them or not, just a random chance of who happens to be interviewing you. You're not going to get along with everyone who does interview you. So there is this kind of random element of life, and it's always important to remember that and not give yourself too hard of a time, but it still means work hard, and that's why I talk about a probability curve. I view everything in life as a matter of probabilities, and so what you want to do is you want to try to tilt the probability curve in your favor. You're never going to be able to guarantee outcomes, but I think through hard work, studying hard, getting good marks, you can increase the probability of the outcomes you'd like to see. And so any questions about the mental interview process? Good? Any questions about free will? Has anyone ever thought about that? I'm just curious. No? It's an interesting question. I think about it quite often. I always find it's a bit perplexing, right? That this idea that maybe you're not responsible for your accomplishments. I find it to be very disturbing. Anyway, so a few points. I put this in more just in case a bank came and looked on these slides. There's no way that I don't think they'll make this far in the video. So anyway, I'm not going to be mentioning any banks by names, but I will be trying to give you guys as much info as possible that will help you out. So every year from second year to fourth year, I applied everywhere. And that entails about 120 hours. And that's through, frankly, the applications on Cool are the easiest applications. The tough ones are the international banks. If you want to work elsewhere in the world, those are the ones that take a lot of time. I usually allocate about 4 hours. I have a pretty standard cover letter, so the cover letter isn't where the time is. It's every bank has their own forms they want you to fill in, right? And then they usually have their 5 or 6 or 3 or 4 questions they want you to fill out. And so I don't really know any way of getting around this, right? I just think that if you want to get a job in trading, unless you have some sort of connections, I don't. My dad works in construction, so I mean I don't have any. And my mom's in film, so I mean, as you can see with the camera and everything. So I don't know anyone in finance. I've done as much networking as I can, but at the end of the day, I've gone through the same HR process that everyone else goes through. The international banks have the skills test, and and then as I said, networking wasn't a significant factor, but I think some people it is. And if you can do that, that's awesome, right? I think Josiah, I think he has some good networks, or he knows people, and I think that helps him out a lot. Because because I know he doesn't spend this much time, and it almost bothers me a bit, because I know from talking to him when we're going through these application processes, he does like 2 applications, and I spend like the whole first semester applying everywhere. So second year statistics, it's about 30 applications each time around. That's what I kind of shoot for. If I run out of banks, I start with hedge funds, and I do a few hedge funds. You know, there's like Bridgeport, and Ray Dalio. I don't know if you guys are familiar. So, some of the guys you look up to. No one called me back second year. I don't think anyone usually does. And then I took a job with Global Securities, and that wasn't a paid internship. So I worked for them for free. And then in fact, the great thing about this though too is I could still trade. So while I was working with them, that's when I lost that was when I had the $18,000 loss month. But the nice thing was I could trade while I was doing the research projects for them. And I still keep in touch with the guy I worked under there. His name's Elvis Picardo, and he's a really bright guy. And I got a lot out of that internship. It was a really good time. So if you can take an internship, even if it's not paid, I got a lot of value out of it for me personally. So, and it's just good in between second and third year. I mean, so what's our breakdown? How many people are first year here? Oh, so that's really impressive. In second year? And what about 2.5? Yeah, there you go. Okay. And then I guess everyone's third and fourth. Okay. So yeah, so if you can do it between second and third year, I found that helped. And yeah, and if your first years, if you can, even between first and second, I mean, if you could get some sort of like unpaid job, get into an office, 1, you'll find out if you like the work. And 2, you'll have something to pop on your resume, or some relevant work experience. Oh, go ahead.
So that's during the summer?
That was during the summer, yeah. So that was 2 months during the summer. And it's just downtown Vancouver. And they still have the program. So it's definitely worth putting on your application list. And it's good work too. They actually get you to do some things that they send out to clients. So it's not like you're just there copying things in the scanner or something like that, because they don't really have scanners anymore. But you are doing some practical work. So third year worked out quite a bit better. So I applied to third. I got 3 callbacks, 3 final round interviews, and then 2 job offers. And so I canceled the other final round interview because I already accepted. And I was in Hong Kong at the time, and it was in Toronto, so I wasn't gonna fly back out just for an interview for an internship. And so I followed. To be honest with you, I basically had everything the same. So it's just, I think, a matter of having that 1 extra year, and then having the work experience, and the work experience, and then actually, and I'll talk about it a little bit more later, is going on exchange, which also really helped. And then year 4 statistics, same thing. And I like each year you get a few more callbacks. I mean, if you can do that, that's great. And then 3 job offers. One caveat I should say is they weren't all on the trading floor. So I applied to both trading floor and wealth management, and so and I find both career paths appealing. It might be different for you. Some of you might want investment banking and trading, depending on what your preference is, and that's just a personal thing. And so I had offers. I had the 1 trading offer from CIBC, and then I had some other offers for private banking and wealth management. And the fact is, trading floors are just a lot more exciting. It pays more, and I think wealth management is something you can do at any point, and trading floor is something you don't get the same opportunity for. So that's why I went with CIBC. And so yeah, highlights, second year is very difficult to get the call back, sub 15%. And then one stat that I'm really proud of is 100% final interviews. But again, I don't read too much into that, because I just happen to have gotten some good interviews. I do think that I've tilted the probability curve in my direction with the interview binder and these other in the law of reciprocity and these things. But there is a randomness element in there as well. Okay, so now styles of interviews. And believe it or not, there's a huge difference between Asia and North America interviews, in my experience. So how many people here would like to work in Asia on the trading floor? Not so much? Okay, 1. How many people would like to work in North America on a trading floor? Is everyone else? And how many people don't care? I guess the people don't put their hands up. So yeah, I mean, the interviews are quite a bit different, so you'll want to keep that in mind. And then, of course, the first and most important thing, if you want to work in Asia, is either go on exchange in Asia or be from Asia. So I'm sure some of you are from Asia, and then I think you'll be fine. If not, go on exchange in Asia, and I think this would be true for Europe, anywhere else. Exchange is awesome anyway. Is anyone here planning on going on exchange? Yeah? And has anyone gone on exchange? No? Okay. Yeah, exchange is awesome. I had such a great time. You see beautiful parts of the world. It doesn't do much. If you go to Asia for your exchange, your GPA was going to get killed, right? The students there are unbelievable. I've never seen a more dedicated group of students in my life, right? They all spend all day studying. And then even like Saturdays, Sundays, you know, you go, or Fridays, Saturdays, around UBC, there'll be like parties, people go out on the weekends. None of that happens at schools in Asia, which I'm sure somebody knows. It was like National University of Singapore. I lived on campus, and like Friday, Saturday nights, it was like dead silent. You didn't hear anything, and then the Starbucks was like packed full of people, I don't know, working ahead or studying ahead. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's a GPA killer. But that in mind too, is because a lot of the, especially for the Morgan Stanley interviews, a lot of the people who were there, like some of them were like Americans, and actually mainly just Americans. I was the only Canadian. Josiah's originally from Hong Kong, and so, but all the Americans I met there. One guy, he had lived in China and knew fluent Mandarin, and he spent like the summer there. And every single other one I met, they had all done something over there. And I suspect that if you haven't, HR just filters you out. So you've really got to have that connection to the region. So interviewing in Asia. Every bank in Asia that I applied to had a quantitative and qualitative test. Has anyone ever written one of these in a bank application? No? Okay. It's something you'll actually want to prepare for. And so I didn't, like I wrote the first time I wrote one, I just figured, it's something like, just something to, like one of those things, if you win a prize in like a cereal box, they have like, add this up just to show that you're paying attention, right? That's what I figured it was. And it wasn't that at all. It's actually quite challenging. And if you go online and you look up quantitative and qualitative tests, you'll see there's these whole forums of like math majors not passing them and things like that. It's actually something that you'll want to prepare yourself for. And you'll want to do that first before you're applying. Because once you fail, you can't apply again to the next year. And if you do apply again to the next year, make up a new email address because they'll know that you failed the year before and they'll probably X you out, right? So that's something you'll definitely want to keep in mind. It's GMAT style testing. So I suspect no one else here has written the GMAT. No, that doesn't make sense that you would. It's more on speed, right? That's what gets people. And so it's nothing like the tests we take here at Sauder where you have 3 hours and you have these sort of long answer questions, you work your way through the formulas. You usually have about a minute and a half, and you've really got to, if the questions aren't overly difficult, they're tricky, and you're under these huge time constraints, right? And so you really have to, if you are planning on writing some of these, I have some flashcards I built that I'd be happy to send your way. And it just goes through the different sort of questions you have, or the different sort of questions. I actually paid some money from a website that had some prep questions after that first failed test. I mean, I was on a bit of a time crunch, so I just thought I'd pay my way around it. And it worked out well, because then I haven't had any problems since then. But it helped, it's important to have those kind of shortcuts. Okay. Then you get on to the networking session. Now this is a point, I had a friend, he was a Sauder grad, he now works in New York. But I thought he summed up networking sessions really well when he said that you won't get the job in a networking session, but you can lose it, right? And so that's something to keep in mind, is that you go to these things, you want to be likable, but you don't want to lose it. In fact, I got this funny, when I was at CIBC in Toronto, and we were up there, and it was quite, there's like 60 people in the room, there's like 5 people who actually work on the floor. And it's a mix of corporate finance and people applying for the trading floor. And so there's this kind of big scrum to kind of talk to everyone. So I ate a bunch of food at first and tried to get my money's worth while I was there. And then I ended up kind of getting into this conversation, and I was sitting there as this one lady, she's the managing director of the derivatives, the options trading at CIBC. And there's this girl she's talking to, and this girl was basically trying to tell her about equity options, right? And this lady was trying to explain to her that that's what I do, and I've been doing this for 15 years. And this girl couldn't clue in, right? And you could see she was just going on and on and on to the point where they're almost in a fight. And then I thought I'd interject, right, try to lighten the mood, right? And I said, like, she's a very feisty young lady, right? Like, you know, just and then we kind of laughed. And then the managing director said to her, is like, you know, like, you shouldn't come off like that. You're coming out like, you know, I do this for a profession. You shouldn't, like, you're almost talking down to me. I don't appreciate it. And then even after that sort of interlude, she didn't get it, right? And she went right back into this sort of rant on equity derivatives until finally the managing director of the options eventually kind of got quite agitated. But needless to say, I didn't see her at the interviews the next day, and I don't think she got the position. So you really just want to go there, show up, chat to some people. This wasn't in North America, but in Asia. And I should say in Asia and an American bank. So it's probably quite a bit different. If it was, you know, CMB or UOB or one of these other banks over there, might be different. But at an American bank, it was all junior traders at the networking session. I suspect because the more senior traders just had better things to do or didn't want to be there. And so that's actually a good opportunity for everyone here, because they're around they'll be around your age. They're there to kind of chat. You can talk. You'll have the same interests. You know, it's a much easier conversation to have, I find. And so, you know, if you do find yourself in that sort of situation, you know, you just talk about things that you're both interested in. I find it can be, you know, they're there to talk as well. They know what you're going through because they had just gone through the interview process. So I find if you find yourself in that situation, it can you can be much more comfortable, and you know, you can just basically having conversation with some acquaintances, I suppose. And then you get onto the interviews. So I had two different types of interviews. So one would be with Barclays, which an English bank, and the other is Morgan Stanley. So this would be an English bank in Asia and an American bank in Asia. And so the American bank was pretty standard. It was 4 interviews, half an hour each. And it's just kind of like, I guess they have a special name for it. It escapes me now, but you just go in, you sit one-on-one, and then it's just kind of a personality match. And so one girl I had was asking me square roots of numbers, right? And so it was the weirdest interview, but you know, she'd give these like big numbers and then ask me the square root. And then I got like, it's funny because I got most of them wrong. Like, you know, I'd be a 0 off or something like that. And then she just hit me with like another square root thing, right? It was bizarre. But then another guy went in. This is actually, I still keep in touch with him. And he was one of my supervisors on the desk. As soon as I came in, he told me to take off my jacket, and we sat down and we just talked about my trading account the whole time. And then he said, you know, tell me like why you lost money here, why you made money here. And so that's why I have a huge amount of randomness, because this is just a matter of meeting the right people. Actually, I had one guy too who's a UBC grad, and you know, he graduated quite a while ago. But that was, again, a fairly easy conversation to have, and it's actually one of the reasons why I'm here, because the more UBC grads, and especially Sauder grads we get on the trading floor, the better it is for us. And so any questions about interviews in Asia at all? No? Okay. So I'll go into, this is the British bank in Asia, and this was totally different. Totally different. So I had one face-to-face interview. There's a couple networking sessions. We spent the day in a hotel with a number of other people. And actually, I was the only Canadian there, and it was actually mostly locals, Singaporeans for the most part. And so it wasn't a lot of expats compared to the American bank, where it was mostly East Coast American schools, so like Georgetown, a lot of MIT people there, a lot of Harvard people. This was all basically local Asian students, which is it's an interesting difference. And so great, you know, you're always going to be with a solid group of people, because I mean, you don't get there unless you are, or you know, personable and all these other sorts of things. And then the case, this is interesting. So we had the one interview, same sort of thing, a number of questions, and then we had a case. And so the case is quite interesting. Actually, we had 2 cases, to be honest with you. So the first case, we did what was it? It was, they give you like a huge amount of information like this, just like your regular case you do in a Sauder class. And then you'd have to come up with a 15-minute presentation on that case, and they'd give you like half an hour to do it, right? And so the key with that, I found, is you have to sort out what's relevant from what's not relevant, and then it's really just about storytelling. So there's no right question or wrong question. You just try to put together a plausible story that's logical, right? And then essentially the person, when you're giving the presentation, will try to hack away at your logic. And so you'll always be given way more information than you need, and that's the challenge, is getting it down to a point where you can make a logical story using some of the information. So don't try to use it all and write off some. That happened in both my both interviews, actually this year as well, when I was interviewing in Singapore. Same sort of thing. So in a room, this one was about cell phones and cell phone companies and credit card companies and where to launch is the case, the kind of fictional case they had, and they had all these different stats on all the different Asian countries, and so you went through a pitch on it. And then the second, another case I saw, and this was actually quite interesting. They put us in a group of 3, and we were to talk about, or they gave us a case, and then one of the employees would sit there, one of the traders sat there and listened to us talk about the case, like plan out our presentation, and then give the presentation. So I guess they saw the back end of it and the front end. And so, again, the important point is not to psych anyone out. And you also, I think it's also important, I think what they're looking at is to show that you can work on a team and you're not going to sit there and try to ramrod things through. So you want to be flexible. If you're working with someone who's really adamant on the point, you just kind of let it go. I also found what I tried to do was ask questions during that. I don't know, just because you have this guy sitting there watching you, and so you want to make it look like you're able to work in a team and just not come off too hostile. Okay, so any questions about those interviews? No? Excellent. Oh, sorry about that. Yes.
The other cases you're talking about, you're saying that you're supposed to come with a logical story. What do you mean by that?
Sure. Okay, so I'll give you examples. So one of the cases, and I don't want to get too specific because, again, you just assign these sort of like non-disclosures. But they'd give you like a bunch of different country stats. So you have, let's say, all the kind of the Asian, South Asian regions, right? Like the ASEAN region, I guess they call it. So you got like Malaysia, Thailand, China, Singapore, Hong Kong, all these places. And then you have their GDP, you have what their credit card penetration is, all these sort of different metrics. And they gave you a ton of them, right? So you had, in fact, I think you have your GDP, you have the credit card infiltration into the society, what was the other one? I think it was something like literacy rates, just kind of all these different metrics. And the key is you can't possibly talk about them all, and you can't prepare a presentation in half an hour including them all, right? And so it's just right off the bat, I didn't bother reading it front to back. You just go through the data, and I just X'd out certain things. So like I didn't talk about literacy rates, for instance, right? And then it was asking, so you're ask what countries you'd go into first and last, or something along those lines. And so I linked China and Hong Kong, right? Because that's pretty simple. You have a special administrative region in Hong Kong, you have China, and so why would you go into both places? Because they're actually quite different economically, as I'm sure everyone knows. But it's a very easy story. Well, you have government officials in Hong Kong and China, they're linked. You get it all done at once. There's some synergies there. And so that made for a really easy pitch. It's pretty solid. I guess they could try to hack it apart, but it's logical, it's sound. It shows that you realize that Hong Kong and China, what the relationship is between those two countries. And so I suppose that's the key as you're going through the data, to look for kind of simple, strong arguments is the way I'd put it. Cool. Any other questions about what those case studies? Okay. Now, interviewing in Canada, or North America, well, I should clear, so I just did interviews. I never applied to any in New York. I only applied to Toronto, Toronto and Asia are the only two places I applied. Europe, I kind of wrote off because of the whole European crisis, right? And I knew some people I met on exchange who were trying to get jobs in Europe. And it's really tough to get jobs in Europe right now, as you can imagine, right? In fact, it's tough to keep your job, right, in Europe right now. So I didn't bother with there. And then same thing with New York. Also, I don't know anyone in New York. And frankly, I'd almost prefer starting in Canada just because it's the jobs, I guess the job prospects here I think are a lot better. Or Asia, because Asia it's a beautiful place, and I really like Asia, so I love living there. So that's the reason why I chose those two places. So the interviewing sessions or the networking sessions in Toronto, there's a ton of Canadians there, right? And it's basically all Canadians. In fact, I don't even think, I'm not exactly sure what the regulation is, but I don't even think people from, does anyone else know? Can you apply to a Canadian bank if you don't go to a Canadian university? I don't think you can. Anyone know? No? Yeah, I don't think you can. I've never ever seen, you can.
I know someone from Singapore actually works for.
Who did? And did they apply so maybe you can then, okay.
Not an investment bank.
Oh, okay. Okay, interesting. Yeah, because I've never seen it. I was always all Canadians at any interview I've done. So, just keep that in mind. It'll all be Canadian universities. A huge amount of East Coast universities. When I was out, okay, go ahead.
No U.S. universities?
No, none. I didn't see any. And you'd think because this year was the first year where there was actually more people coming from the U.S. to Canada than Canada to the U.S., which is kind of an interesting swing in terms of migration patterns. But yeah, there's no U.S. Universities there. And it makes sense because we applied to Canadian banks through Cool, right? And I think all the universities have their kind of own systems, rather than where the international, the Asian banks I was applying through the online system that they have within the bank. So yeah, pay attention. And this is another. I think this helps if you're shy, or you're not comfortable in these things. Just stand in the group, right? No one's going to remember, right? But just don't be standing with a bunch of other people. Even if you just stand on the edge of the group and don't say anything, it makes it look like you're part of it. And then if you really want to get a little more adventurous, stand on the edge of one group and then go to stand to the edge of the other group and just kind of work your way around, right? And I guarantee you, no one will notice, and then they'll remember you as someone who was actively involved in this networking session. The interviews, it was a little bit different in the sense that you still interviewed with traders, but it wasn't as intense, I found, in Canada. So the questions were much more I didn't get any square root questions. Everyone was very friendly, right? So I don't know if it's a Canadian thing or what the story was, but the overseas in Asia, and the American banks in Asia, and then even the other banks I interviewed with in Asia, they were all much more hostile in the questions. They're much more aggressive. Where Canada, they still have the basic DCF, but I found people were much more interested in who you were and these sorts of things. And alumni, of course, always. I remember you were talking about Trek Toronto. Is anyone else going on Trek Toronto? No? Does anyone know what Trek Toronto is? Does everyone know? Kinda? Somewhat? Okay. Sounds like a cool program, so if you don't, it's worth checking out. And I guess who's it with, Trek Toronto?
Through UBC.
Is it just the Career Center? Or?
Yeah, the Career Center.
Yeah, and how much was it? $400, right? Yeah, so it's $400, you get a trip out to Toronto for how long, a week? Yeah, so awesome deal. So conclusion, so why I'm here, Sauder's a world-class institution, not because we're so fantastic, but because people before us were so fantastic. So, we're part of this continuum, and I think it's really important to try to build on that. Sometimes you'll get people who go here and they really don't appreciate how awesome awesome an institution this is, right? There's a ton of opportunity here. I don't get into this, some people talk about East Coast schools having more. I don't buy into that at all. I think if going here, you can do anything and more what they can do on the East Coast. They may have that network, but you're connected to Asia, and that's where a lot of the stuff's going to be happening in the future. And so I think it's a world-class institution. I think us as students, if we continue to build on it, I think we become even more of a world-class institution, or more well-renowned. When I was working at Morgan Stanley in Hong Kong, UBC was very highly looked upon in terms of university to come out of. There's guys on the trading floor, like I said, who were there before I was, and so it's keep that in mind. And then obviously remember that this isn't some sort of altruistic act. This is in your self-interest, right? I'm not here because I care about anyone anymore. I'm here because I understand that the more of you who get on the trading floor, the better it is for all of us, and you expand that network, and it really is in your own self-interest, or what I like to call your enlightened self-interest. And then I'm sure you guys all saw the move up in the rankings for the MBA program, which essentially is what the BCom is like. And so my main takeaways are investigate whether you like what you're doing, because that's extremely important. In fact, there's 2 things you have to do right, apparently. There's this research paper I read. There's 2 things you have to do right in order to apparently be happy. I don't know exactly how they define that, but the first one is find a job you like. And can anyone guess what the second one is?
Find a partner you like?
Yeah, very good. That's the second one. So apparently if you can get those 2 right, if you can get married to the right person and get the right job, you will be happy. So don't screw those 2 things up. Or try to get one of the 2 right, and then you'll be ahead of the game. Interview binder, like I said, it's huge for me, right? Like I had JP Morgan call up for an interview, and I'd already accepted, so I ended up having to turn him down. But I did the phone interview anyway, because why not, right? And they called me up, didn't give me any warning for it or anything like that. And so I grabbed, like I was sitting in my place just up the road here at UBC. As soon as he started talking, I was like, oh yeah, I can do the interview now. Pop open the interview binder. I got everything there, and I can just kind of, well, tell me, he says, tell me about your resume. Well, it's right there, right? And tell me about anything else you got going on. You can talk about it. So that's a very important resource to have. Don't psych yourself up or psych yourself out. Apply everywhere and have fun. You only live once. And with that, ends my presentation. So thank you for coming.